It was the summer of 2022 when I had officially realized that I was incredibly disconnected from reality, and that is going to take me quite a while to find my way back. Spirituality is something that can be incredibly pleasant. It's seen as meditation, candles, spells, whatever path of spirituality you're going down. A lot of times this is seen as something that is more peaceful. Going on a spiritual journey is something that is typically seen as beautiful, as healing, as loving. When I was doing a lot of spirituality, I heard a lot of the love and light stuff, and I shared a lot of the love and light with, in my content or with people that I talked to. I was really deceived into thinking that it was entirely neutral, but I am definitely here to say that spirituality can be incredibly dangerous if you don't really know how to protect yourself, if you don't have a solid grounding in reality, if you don't have a solid understanding of who you are as a person. This can be extremely risky. And a little bit of why I want to tell my story is to let you guys know some of the dangers that you can interact with when you engage in spirituality, and also how difficult it is to find yourself again after entirely, like I said, I lost myself. I entirely disconnected from reality. I disconnected from who I was as a person, and it was scary in a lot of ways. I'm much better now, and I want to talk to you and tell you all about what happened to me. In my studies as a baby atheist, I have interacted with a lot of other atheist advocates on the internet, and one of them is named Aaron Ra, and he talks a lot about the auto-deception of faith, or essentially how we can delude ourselves with spiritual ideas, and we can kind of convince ourselves of ideas, and how incredibly easy this is to do with spiritual topics.
Religion is literally a matter of make-believe, a form of self-hypnosis to preserve a preferred delusion. One way to commit to your conviction is to be completely invested in it.
If I am deeply honest with myself, that is exactly what occurred. I found a lot of little pockets on the internet, and I essentially indoctrinated myself into these little spiritual culty communities. I didn't necessarily feel like I was part of a cult community necessarily, but I had adopted cult-like beliefs and a cult-like attachment to certain beliefs, and a lot of that, fear around leaving that belief system. And very similar to how I felt around evangelical Christianity. I almost felt like I had done that to myself all over again, but with other types of, spiritual concepts, things like manifestation and other things like that, energy healing, all that type of stuff. One of the issues of why this was so difficult was this stuff was really fun. It was really fun and really enjoyable. It is really nice to live with your head in the clouds. I understand why people do it. I understand why it's comfortable to be not so in touch with reality, because it's scary out here. Like, the world is in an awful spot right now, and it's scary and terrible. Anything that we can do to make us feel more empowered sounds exciting, right? So I think that one of the things that I was trying to do was trying to do my part in making the world a better place. But I just believed something that was just unsupported by, it wasn't supported by reality. So it wasn't going to get me very far. I am at a place where I feel like I'm far enough away from those ideas to really admit how much I feel like I resonate a lot with the idea of spiritual narcissism. And I feel like I almost lost myself in that idea because I was so focused on the mission, the spiritual mission, my spiritual mission, that it really didn't matter what other people were doing. Just my path seemed to be the most important thing. And that's embarrassing now to look back on, because I'm not gonna lie, I feel like I was bulldozing over people in order to do what I thought was my divine mission. Even when I was on the spiritual journey, there were many times where I would hear people say, be careful of the ego. The ego can sometimes latch on to the spiritual journey and really make it difficult for you to humble yourself. You can kind of lose yourself in spirituality. And I thought that I had a really good understanding of that, but looking back, I definitely did not have a good understanding of that whatsoever. Let me explain to you how I kind of conceptualized where I was getting my spiritual guidance from. So I had adopted some beliefs that stated that there are certain individuals on this planet who are star seeds, and these star seeds can are pretty much sent here by the universe or the creator or something like that to raise the collective consciousness of planet Earth, and therefore bring on the fifth dimension or the sixth dimension. I forget which dimension it is right now. I was thoroughly convinced of this. And when you believe something so that you are being motivated by something so much bigger than you, it almost feels like you have the divine right to be doing what you're doing. The words that I was saying, I believed were kind of like blessed almost by the universe or by this greater consciousness or whatever. I thought about myself so highly, and not in a sense that's like good and positive way, but I think in a overinflated sense of importance. I do want to talk for a second about spiritual psychosis, and I even though I am a psychological mental health professional, I'm not going to say that I, fully, met all the criteria for a psychotic break or whatever. But I know that I definitely had some symptoms of spiritual psychosis. And I was, yeah, like I said, very disconnected from reality generally, and was deeply convinced of these delusions. Not gonna lie, I'm just gonna be honest with you. Now that I look back, I see them as delusions. Another aspect of spiritual psychosis that I feel like I resonate with is these feelings of grandiosity. I saw myself as overly important. My sense of importance was overinflated. And I know I just kind of ranted about that for a little bit, but this part is really important, and I really want to reiterate this. I want to make it clear, and I feel like I have some sympathy, right? For other people who are experiencing this, and even for people in my life, like people in my family, who I think can sometimes have some of this, spiritual or religious narcissism. It's so easy to get into that space, and when I was in it, I would never have admitted that I was being like spiritually narcissistic. In my head, I was deeply doing this for the collective. You know what I mean? For the greater good. But I was so disconnected from reality that I really couldn't even see. I couldn't see me myself. Really, I had such a clouded vision over the things that I was doing. So that was pretty frustrating, and I am glad to be a little more aware now. But when it happened, it was good at the time, right? Like it's so hard to talk about this stuff because it was so blissful and at the same time so toxic. That's like literally the best way that I could put it. This toxicity really ended up reaching ahead in the summer of 2022, and that was when I had really realized how much I had screwed up. I had uprooted my life. I believed a lot of the new age spiritual rhetoric that said things like, the 9 to 5 job is you living in the matrix, and the only way to be truly free is if you let go of all of those tethers and you live a consciousness driven life. You let spirit, you let the creator or whatever guide every step. I deeply believed that money was energy, and that it really didn't matter if you worked, that no matter what happened, things would always kind of work out, that the energy of the universe would always bless you and make sure that you were never suffering or never like struggling too much. And even if you did end up struggling, that was kind of a part of the plan of spirit in the first place. This is terrible advice, my friends. I will be honest with you in some senses that I made some financial decisions that were incredibly irresponsible and that hurt not only me, but also my wife, right? I'm a married person. And we did make some of these decisions together, but a lot of these were influenced by my thoughts and feelings of grandiosity at the time. And also this belief that, money is energy, and that the universe will just kind of give you the energy that you need, even if you spend a ton of quote unquote energy. So that was me in 2022. And I was really grappling with the fact that I had made some of these really difficult, really shitty decisions. And I had to grapple with the fact that I had really put myself in a shitty spot. And with what I was doing at the time, I was trying to hold on so much that maybe, just maybe, these things would work. That just maybe I could do one more ritual or one more other thing that would just make my life all come together, just like I had really hoped that it would. None of those things ended up occurring in the way that I had hoped or had wanted them to be. And I really ended up flat on my face. I was at a spot where I was very disconnected from social things, like social individuals, people, stuff like that. I had quit my job, which in hindsight, I'm glad that I ended up doing that, but it was not a financially wise decision to make at the time. And that also made it incredibly difficult for my family just to stay afloat, and ended up putting a lot of stress on my wife because she had a job at the time. So I had an incredible amount of shame for how much I had hurt my family, and how I had really let my own interests and desires, and at the time I really believed that it was this greater goal, this greater path or mission of the universe. But I had to really start to grapple and realize, like, I don't think that this stuff is real. I don't know if this stuff is really real anymore. And I had people in my life that were telling me, like, yeah, this stuff is real. And I just, with my life falling apart around me, I really had no choice but to really look at my life and admit, no, that this isn't working anymore. This isn't healthy anymore. And I was devastated. I was devastated. I mentioned that the feelings of shame that I had were so immense, and the fact that we had some financial difficulties now were, I was embarrassed that we were dealing with what we were dealing with. But like I said, I owned up to my failures. I talked to my wife, asked for forgiveness, and that was a healing thing for us as a couple to be able to talk through. I had really believed that I was doing all of the love and light to everyone around me. You know, I was doing all these meditations and all that stuff. And it's crazy because no matter how much I was meditating, I was blinded, you know what I mean, to the harm that I was causing to the people who were very close to me, due to my, selfish and ego-driven desires. But like I said, I had to own up to that, and it was shameful and embarrassing. I think I also like made a video where I talked about some of this stuff, and I talked about making mistakes, and I made a video about that as well. I kind of owned up to a lot of the shit that I had gotten myself into, and then I was alone. This was the same time that, as my spirituality started to crumble, my entire concept of religion and spirituality was crumbling as well. When I left Christianity, I didn't have a really bad breakdown. I was able to jump from Christianity over to other types of spirituality and religion, and that was more exciting and liberating for me. So when I ended up losing this, like, the spirituality was all that I had left in terms of religion, right? And so this seemed like the end. I was losing connection to everything that was supernatural and all of that stuff. And that ended up being what happened. I ended up, becoming an atheist. But that was awful. That was such a terrible time. I I was so sick and so unhealthy. My mental health was literally in the toilet. One of the things that I had embarrassingly done to myself when I was navigating this spiritual journey was I believed that true spiritual healing means that you don't take worldly chemical medications. And so I convinced myself that going off of all my medications was the spiritual thing for me to do. That was a severe detrimental mistake to my health, my overall health and well-being. I'm not sure if this would have been the case if I did not end up going through that kind of massive mental breakdown at the end of this journey. Maybe I would have been stable. But my assumption, kind of based off of the way my life was going, is that I was in a pretty fragile spot in my mental health, and that with me kind of having this recognition of, all these spiritual ideas were falling apart around me, I collapsed. I had completely lost myself. When I tell you guys that, like, I really went through a mental breakdown. I was incapable of doing the majority of just basic things for myself. And I sometimes it feels even a little bit shameful and embarrassing that spirituality just wrecked me. It literally destroyed me in this way. But I really had to start from ground zero, like every day. Like, how do I take care of myself? How do I get back onto kind of making a schedule for myself? I need to find a job. Like, there was all of these things that I had realized that I needed to do, and I was so incredibly overwhelmed at this time. I knew that I couldn't do it alone, and I asked for help. That was one of the most important things that I needed to do. I also had disconnected from my therapist at the time because I think I believed that I kind of didn't need anyone else to guide me. At least not people who weren't spiritual in my head. I needed spiritual guidance, not this therapeutic psychological help. None of that silly stuff. Just spiritual guidance. That was really what I really needed. And yes, I maybe did need spiritual guidance, but I also needed emotional and mental health support as well. Asking for help was pretty tough, but also was super important. I literally got every bit of access to support that I could. I was able to access a therapist at a lower cost through this program called Open Path. I'll put a link to that either in the video or down below. You pay like a $60 or $80 fee or something like that, and then you get access to reduced sessions for all the practitioners that are on their page. I think the sessions run from like $40 to $80, which is pretty. And there's like no insurance, so if you are someone who doesn't have insurance and needs access to therapy sessions on a little bit of a cheaper side, you may want to look into Open Path. Anyway, I was able to use that resource. Like I said, I was really low income at the time. We barely had any money, and I didn't have a job, so I didn't have health insurance at the time. And I wanted something pretty quickly, and I think that our copay was higher than the cost that I had for paying for these sessions, out of pocket through this kind of reduced fee situation. So I was able to get a therapist. My insurance had I was using my wife's insurance for some things, and her insurance had some type of a life coach situation where they just offered coaching for people through text. So I grabbed one of those and had a coach help me. That was super helpful for things just like getting my life back on track, like very basic stuff, getting my life back together, kind of organizing my brain in the direction of finding a job and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure I stayed with that individual until I was able to find a job. It was several months until that happened. And I also reached out to a psychiatrist and was able to get back on some medication and was able to see my mental health kind of even out a little bit more. And that was incredibly great. And after a couple months, I definitely noticed myself feeling much more stable. I made an interesting commitment to myself that in the year of 2023, I would really commit to rest. I would not commit to big projects. Like I almost committed to doing nothing. Like it was the year of doing nothing for me. And this was important and it didn't mean like, I couldn't make any videos or couldn't do any projects and stuff. Like I could do those things, but I wouldn't take on any really large, burdensome projects or ideas. I would kind of let myself just do a lot of the integration work that was really important because I had done a ton of healing work during all my spiritual times. Like those things were super important, and that healing that I did was real healing, I think. But I needed some time to integrate all of those things. And I also needed some time to forgive myself. I needed some time to relearn how to navigate life because of how disconnected I had been from reality. So in 2023, I rested. It was interesting because I spent a whole year not really pushing myself, not really setting goals or anything like that. But it was an incredibly important healing practice. I think that I needed to see that it was okay for me to just exist, for me to just be, for me to just rest, and that I was worthy of love and I was worthy of acceptance and all of those things, even if I wasn't a star seed that was doing something to, bring the collective consciousness to a higher space or whatever. I needed to just be okay with me just being Mav and just loving myself for being Mav, and that was it. This was also a time when I know this is going to sound funny, but I had officially recognized and embraced the fact that I am a human being. I am a Homo sapien. I am a very intelligent animal who just happens to live on this earth and have an entire self concept, the ability to relate to others. But at the end of the day, I am an animal, right? And that was something that I needed, that I so desperately needed to understand and grasp as an atheist person. Being able to recognize the joy of just existing as myself, the the peace and rest of understanding myself as an animal and looking to other animals for like wisdom. You know what I mean? That when I see a bear just resting, or I see lions and they just hang out, they're done, fighting and catching their food, and they just hang out and chill. I think that I felt that I needed to do that too, that I needed to just exist and understand that I am valuable just based off of my existence here on the planet. Trees are valuable just based off of their existence on the planet and the way that they add beauty to the world. They add oxygen, right, to the world. And those things might seem small, but they end up making a difference. And I'm just one little person, I'm just one little guy, you know what I mean? And the things that I do, some of the things that I do may not have that big of an influence. Some of the things I do might not have no influence on anybody else but me. Some of the things that I do may influence a lot of people. And all of those things are okay. None of those things make me more worthy or less worthy. But this was something that I couldn't actually accept without doing it in practice and having a time where I wasn't kind of becoming something magical or amazing for myself. I just was existing. I just was being. I don't want to kind of communicate that the year 2023, I just sat around and things like that. That would have been fine, you know what I mean? But that was also a time where I was building myself in a professional sense. So like I said, I lost my job. I went from having no job to three jobs, like, yeah, three and a half kind of jobs. And I still do. I still work for three different practices and see clients on my own as well. So things have transformed a ton since then. Within this past year, within kind of 2023, 2024, we have definitely recovered a lot financially. And making some coin, which is really, really nice. And I'm not relying on the magic of energy to just materialize money for me out of nowhere, which is really cool. I know that I can put work and put effort into getting some type of return, which is kind of just the way that the world works right now. And I'm able to do that to be able to provide for my family, which is really awesome. On top of work, I also realized that another thing that is that's so important about life is building relationships. I remember that there would be times where I'd just be sitting with my wife and I'd be like, what are we doing? Like, we're just sitting around. Like, we're not really doing anything. Like, I need to be doing something with my life to feel more valuable. And I don't remember when exactly I had this realization, but I was sitting around and just thought, like, like, building a life with someone and having connections and, like, I could just imagine me, like, laying and cuddling with my wife is, like, an amazing thing to be doing. Like, that is me building my life with my partner, and that is something that's valuable. I don't have to be doing something for the grand collective of all humanity to be doing something important, to be doing something of value. I'm learning that being a member of my family, being a active provider in my family, participating and loving my family members, and I'm just talking about my immediate, my wife and our little fur babies and her family and things like that. Like, that's really all I've got, is to be able to build and pour into those people in my life. And that has been a gift, just to build relationships and to deepen relationships with people in that way. I've been connecting people on the internet a little bit more, just sharing some of my ideas, silly conversations that I have on TikTok, and just sharing pieces of myself. And it's been so interesting that for me to navigate anxiety around sharing my opinions has been really, really interesting. And this all kind of comes together to to kind of share with you that I'm starting to wake up again. Um, Obviously, these things were kind of start slowly building back when I was in my little hibernation phase, but I am really feeling myself just this almost like this exciting desire to expand myself a little bit more, to put my energy out into the world a little bit more, to create content and stuff like that that is engaging to other people, build connections, building more connections with people on the internet. I'm feeling more like pouring myself out. I feel like I've poured a lot into myself and my cup is starting to runneth over and I can share it with other people. This feels so different just sharing in this way than it did. I watched a video of myself last year. I just know that it's a video, religious trauma video, and there's like this purple background. I was reading off of a script and I looked so seemed so fake. I made a video back in December of 2022. So this was a little bit right after I had gone through my really bad just the mental health stuff. I was starting to maybe recover a little bit, but I could definitely tell that I was not in the same space as I was not like in a place that I really wanted to be, like a really healthy spot. And watching that video of myself, good God, it just looked like just such forced happiness and such forced energy that I was giving off, and just so uncomfortable for me to watch, honestly. I'll keep it up because I'm realizing how interesting it is to watch a person grow on a YouTube channel. And I want you guys to see me grow too. I want you to see, I'm going to leave about my mistakes. Some of the videos that I posted that I feel like are ideologically dangerous, I just removed. I put a lot of myself out there during that time, and I felt like I owed somebody something. I don't know exactly what I was. I think that I was still doing that thing where I felt like I owed the world me, or I had to do something bigger, in order to matter for my life to be meaningful. But I'm in such a different place where I really am believing that just building meaning in my life has nothing to do with any of that stuff. It doesn't really have much to do with, I guess, I don't know, me being presentable to the world. I'm realizing that a lot of meaning in life is just survive. Like, and I know that this sounds interesting, like surviving, but like committing to living a good life with yourself, like putting heavy work into having a happy and committed life. Like that takes a lot of energy, but that I think is so valuable in living a meaningful life. Um, Another thing that's helped, and another thing that I think has been guiding me in that direction towards having more meaning, is trying to slow down a little bit more, spend more time out in nature, go camping, stuff like that. Um, Even I have these ideas about being able to just grow my own food and things like that, and being able to be more involved in my life and just life-giving things like feeding myself. Sometimes I feel like it's helpful to get us to back to the spots of really realizing, like, what is it like, what is life as an animal like, right? Things like finding food and shelter, we're so far away from those things, and I think that we can take our, I don't know, our instinct for granted, and when we start to rebuild that instinct, it feels good for me, at least. And I hope that that makes sense to you guys. I hope that this rant makes a little bit of sense, but we'll move forward. Now that I'm starting to wake up from hibernation, I feel like much stronger in terms of the way that I'm able to navigate things. I feel a lot more resilient, and I care a lot less about people's comments and things like that. Um, just life, my emotions feel so much better. So I'm so glad to be at a better spot. When I was doing all my spiritual stuff, I was like writing all the time. I was making a shit ton of content. And now when I think about doing that again, it seems a little bit overwhelming. Like this, wow, that's like so much stuff. I don't know how I could do all that stuff again. So I feel there's some overwhelm and some uncertainty. So I don't want to come across like I'm perfect or anything. So there are still some things that I'm navigating. If you guys knew how long it took me to sit down and make a video like this, and how long I've been ruminating about this, you would get it. Like I've definitely not arrived. I'm in a much better spot, but I'm not arrived. But I will talk more about that at the end of the video. The other thing that I'm noticing after this kind of period of rest is I am much more resilient in terms of wanting to try things again. And even if I try something and it doesn't end up going very well, I still am pretty willing to continue to attempt it. I'm sure there might be things that doesn't work out with, but I do feel I have a lot more grit. Another thing that I wanted to mention is religious trauma syndrome. So like I said, about a year ago, right, was when I was, probably it's over a year now, because it was like the end of mid 2022 was when I really started taking my religious trauma recovery seriously. And religious trauma syndrome has a couple of very specific symptoms that obviously do look, there are other symptoms that do also mirror these things, like these symptoms can overlap. But the whole point of me bringing this up is I wanted to say that I really do think that I am officially in religious trauma remission. When I look at the symptoms of religious trauma syndrome, I do not meet that criteria anymore, which is really exciting. So I wanted to very, very briefly just run you guys through that. I want to take a second to remind you guys of some of those symptoms in case you forget, and talk about what my experience of them was like very briefly, and how I feel like I've navigated those, some of the struggles with those things, and I will also mention what things I'm still struggling with. There are 4 different categories that Marlene Winnell, who coined the term religious trauma syndrome, has as symptoms. So we have the cognitive symptoms, emotional, social, and cultural. So with the cognitive symptoms, we have things like confusion, poor critical thinking ability, negative beliefs about self-ability and self-worth, black and white thinking, perfectionism, and difficulty with decision making. So the way that my brain has changed so much from this is, I think, incredible. I've struggled with these things, and I think that I will struggle with these things just because I'm a neurodivergent person. So some things like critical thinking, because of my prefrontal cortex has some difficulties, is always going to be a challenge for me. Difficulties with decision making is probably going to be a bit of a challenge for me. And also like things like my self-esteem is definitely a challenge, and I feel like that is beyond just religious trauma syndrome. But even with those things, my perception of myself is so much more neutral these days, guys. And I know that that's interesting. I think you probably would expect me to say my perception of myself is so much higher, but it's not. It's so much healthier, in my opinion. I don't have an inflated sense of self anymore. I have a much more healthy sense of self. Now when I kind of maybe make content, it's not like I'm making content for the collective, for the greater good of all the universe. It's I'm making a video because I think it's fun. I'm a unique individual, so I have my own unique perspective to add to the world. But that really is kind of where the value begins and ends. I have certain professional things, that I'm skilled at, and so I'm able to share my professional expertise and stuff like that. But that is where kind of my value is. It's not this overinflated, you are sent by the universe type of thing. So that has been really, really helpful. One interesting aspect about that is I noticed that my beliefs about my self-ability are still a little bit iffy. I have realized that it was so motivating to believe that you were being sent by God, you were being sent by the universe to do something. Everything that you did felt like it mattered, and it was a much bigger deal. Now I'm just a regular Joe, right? I just do stuff because I'm doing stuff, right? And it can feel much, much less exciting, much more boring, to be honest. And that sometimes can make it hard for me to believe in myself, because it's like, what's the point? I'm just a person. What's the point of me doing something? But I have to put in more work to kind of tell myself, no, you're worthy just because you are. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's harder than I'm worthy because the universe has sent me and I am a spiritual being living a human experience, and that's why I have worth. It was hard for me to rediscover my worth as a human animal, right? With the emotional stuff, things like depression, anxiety, anger, grief, loneliness, difficulty with pleasure, and the loss of meaning, I would say the most significant things that caused all the other stuff was the loss of meaning. To me, was probably the most earth-shattering thing. I was someone who woke up every day just believing that, God sent me, to do something for the world. But that's just not it. That's just not really what the world is here for. That's not what I'm here for. And it was really devastating to lose that sense of importance. But I have, like I said, just started to work on having value just because I exist, just because, I see value in plants and animals, and I can just view myself in that same kind of neutral value. And that has helped a lot. Things, like I mentioned before, medication, therapy, support has helped tremendously with my mental health. Yeah, getting as much support is great. Family support, talking to my partner has also been helpful. But yeah, I definitely have much less symptoms of these things generally. Like I said, I have a lot of other kind of conditions where I still might deal with anxiety. But with the social things, we have the symptoms are a loss of social network, family rupture, social awkwardness, sexual difficulty, and behind schedule on developmental tasks. So for that one, there's a lot more there that's complicated. I would definitely say that my loss of social network has been something that I struggled with since after I left Christianity. And I'm slowly working on building that again. Definitely feeling more open to connect with other people and stuff like that and building relationships. The rupture of my family is something that has just kind of fundamentally changed my life forever. It's not really something that can be fixed. It's just learning how to navigate this difference in life. Kind of grief. It's kind of like grief. There's nothing really you can do to change the fact that this situation is terrible or really, really sad or you've lost this person, but it's about learning how to navigate this new territory. So that's where I feel like I'm at. With social awkwardness, I've been awkward before. This happened. I just was born awkward. So that just exists all the time. And sexual difficulty is something that wasn't too much of an issue after leaving spirituality or anything. There were like whispers of it, but it wasn't too significant. It didn't have too much of an issue. And like being behind on developmental tasks, that one I think is also important because I really think that your brain on religion and spirituality as a child, I think that it really impacts just your development, the way that you view the world, the way that you see things. I think that it makes you much more susceptible to developing things like ruminant religious obsessions or moral obsessions called like moral scrupulosity or like religious OCD type of patterns. I know I'm an incredibly ruminative person. I'm somewhat, yeah. And so these are things that I feel like are a little bit developmental, like things that I'm not sure how much I can change because they really feel like things that are like really ground into who I am as a person. But I'm working on how to navigate them as best as possible and accommodating for myself, which is also really great. The cultural symptoms are unfamiliarity with the secular world, feeling like a fish out of water, difficulty belonging, and information gaps. Let me tell you guys, okay? Information gaps? Where? Information gaps who? Right? I've been doing so much work with filling information gaps recently. I've mentioned that my wife helps a lot with just like things like music and culture. Things like science, though, I have just dove into learning more about the world around me scientifically, and that's been so liberating. Being able to, like I said, accept myself as a human animal was part of me kind of accepting science and evolution and all of that stuff. Super important. Getting connected with the secular world was something that I think I had been doing since I've begun my deconstruction. So that is kind of an ongoing journey and still something that is kind of almost like a permanent, I would say, kind of way that it has shifted my life because not growing up watching those things has always changed the way that I kind of interact with culture generally. So, and also like I don't know if I have an interest. I don't always have an interest in kind of engaging with all of the things that like in popular culture. So it's also about figuring out what's important to you, right? Just because you have information gaps about culture doesn't necessarily mean that you need to fill them all. There are some that are probably relevant or important, especially topics that are important or exciting to you or things that you just want to learn about. Fill in those gaps. Knowledge really is power. Holding on to that, I feel like is really, really good for people if you want to, yeah, grow in that way. With all of these symptoms, I feel like some of the sticky points I've mentioned slowly, but I want to reiterate some of those things, saying that I'm really struggling still with how ego based and how kind of narcissistic how I interacted with creating, making content and stuff like that was. The fact that I felt motivated by a spiritual or cosmic or divine purpose, I feel like really fucked with me. It fucked with my ability to create just because. Like I said, this year of just kind of existing has really helped with that. But I've noticed, like I said, it took me a while to get this video out because I was just having such a difficult time with figuring out why I was doing anything. So that is something that I'm starting to realize it doesn't really matter. Sometimes you don't necessarily have a reason to do something. You just do it because you want to. You think that is interesting. And this one, I think that it's interesting, and I kind of wanted to share some stuff, and I'm hoping to connect with some people. Like that's why I really wanted to share this video, is to make connections. So hopefully I've reached. If you're here and you're still watching this, thank you for being here. Reach out to me, send me a message or something, because like I said, we're looking to make connections here. Last aspect, the last thing that I wanted to mention here is a little note that I made up in my last video about the religious trauma healing journey. And in that video, I mentioned that there is like a 3-step path to religious trauma healing. And I made that up. You know what I mean? It's just kind of the way that I was in conceptualizing those things at the time. But I thought they were still pretty good. And I'll tell you the 3 steps. So the 3 steps of the healing religious trauma syndrome process was deconstruction, learning, and integration. So the deconstruction process is really tearing down all of the old beliefs and things that you don't necessarily want to hold on to anymore, like loss, grieving, pain, like dealing with all of those things and navigating that. The learning part of the pattern was like actually getting out there, living life, practicing things, filling in information gaps, making connections, like doing the stuff. Learning, I think action is a part of learning, and that was something that I put within that step. And then the last step was integration, just allowing these things to kind of settle into yourself and navigating life in this new way, right? It seemed like I had presented it as a linear step, like step 1, step 2, step 3, and then arrival. But I'm really realizing that this is probably a lot like the grieving process. And my assumption is that I'm going to have to do a lot of deconstructions. I feel like I'm going through a mini deconstruction with navigating how I believed myself to be in the past with spirituality. I'm having to let go and kind of tear down my ideas about myself and rebuild them again within the learning stage, and then integrating that process and kind of living that out and stuff like that. So I'm really understanding that this doesn't seem to be just a quick and easy, you just go down the path and everything's fixed. It seems like this is a lifelong process that I will probably come back in maybe a couple years and make another update video and tell you new things that I've learned, and how silly I was to think that it was a cycle maybe a couple years ago. Who knows how my mind might change around this stuff. And I just feel so much more open to that possibility, to the idea of life changing, to the idea of not knowing exactly how things are going to go. Thank you so much for being here and checking out this video with me. If you're here, thank you. Like I said, the channel is something that is important to me. I do like to reach out and connect to you, and that's why I'm here sharing my life with you right now. And I just appreciate you guys checking in with the channel and hopefully checking in on me, and sharing your comments and things like that. I do like to go through, and I do read I think almost all of my comments. I don't always get back to them. I don't always like comment back, but I do see them all. So I really do appreciate you guys just engaging with me. Like and follow, or subscribe and all of that stuff if you're interested. Take care of yourselves today. Be compassionate towards yourself today. I'll see you in the next video. Peace and love. See you next time.